Welcome to Olympian Water Testing, giving you the best in water analysis. Today we are looking at some frequently asked questions about chromium in our water. So if you ever want to know about chromium 6 in the water, and every question you might have to ask that you can possibly think of, we're going to take a look at the most important ones. So first of all, what is chromium 6 and why is it in our water? Chromium 6 is an element that's commonly found at low levels in drinking water. It can occur naturally in the ground, but it may also enter drinking water sources via industrial pollution. And research conducted in collaboration with Wisconsin Geological Survey strongly suggests a natural origin of chromium-6 found in Madison's drinking water. Though it's not likely caused by industrial pollution, chromium-6 has been detected at low levels, less than 2 parts per billion. And it's also been detected in wells. Now the big question, is it dangerous? Chromium-6 is known to be a potential carcinogen or potent carcinogen when inhaled. And it was recently found to also cause stomach cancer in laboratory mice and rats when they were exposed to extremely high levels in drinking water. And right now, there is no federal regulatory standard for chromium-6, although the state of California has enacted its own regulatory limit of 10 parts per billion. How do rates of stomach cancer compare to the rest of the state and the nation? The level of chromium in the area's drinking water has remained steady since the 1970s, yet rates of stomach cancer have declined over the same period, and the rate of stomach cancer is well below the national average. Now, could coal ash dumped into the isthmus decades ago be a sign of chromium? It's unlikely coal ash is contaminating the water with chromium-6, and wells nearest to the known coal ash deposits on isthmus have some of the lowest levels of chromium-6. So it might not all be caused by industrial runoff, although it can be. In some areas, it depends. One has never shown detectable levels, and others have shown trace levels of 0.3 parts per billion, although most of the time it's not detected at all. If chromium levels in Madison's water increased, chromium found in the water is likely naturally occurring and has been present in areas water for generations, and total chromium levels have been measured at wells since at least the early 1970s. The levels are relatively unchanged since the time. The techniques and methods for measuring chromium may have changed, but the concentrations have not. Chromium-6 was the carcinogen made famous by the movie Erin Brockovich. Hinckley, California residents were awarded a multi-million-dollar settlement from a Pacific Gas and Electric company that used chromium-6 to prevent rust in a cooling water as its compressor station. Wastewater from the station percolated into the groundwater, affecting the area approximately 2 miles long and nearly a mile wide, and concentrations in the groundwater monitoring wells in Hinckley have measured over 500 parts per billion. Now, what's the difference between total chromium, chromium-6, and 3? Chromium exists in the environment and drinking water sources in 2 principal forms: trivalent, which is 3, and hexavalent, which is 6. The sum of all chromium in a sample is called total chromium. So chromium-3 occurs naturally in food, and it's actually an essential dietary nutrient, where 6 is more toxic form of chromium. And it can transform from chromium-3 to 6, vice versa, depending on the physical conditions, oxidative stress, the manufacturing, and the chemical environment. And for example, industrial releases of chromium-6 often convert to 3 after being deposited in the soil. What is the current water quality standards for chromium? Well, currently there's no federal regulation for chromium-6. The federal government regulates only the total chromium, and maximum containment level, MCL, is 100 UGL, or 100 parts per billion. And when the regulation was established, it was assumed that all chromium in drinking water was chromium-6, and the MCL of 100 parts per billion was protective of human health. The EPA has been collecting nationwide occurrence data for chromium-6 in drinking water, and the agency plans to use this information to determine whether a regulatory limit specifically for chromium-6 should be established. What are the total chromium levels for different wells? Well, they're tested annually for total chromium, and the ranges go from detection to a little over 2 parts per billion and are relatively unchanged in over 30 years of test results. Now, why doesn't the EPA require testing of chromium-6? When the total chromium standard was established in 1992, chromium-6 was classified as a carcinogen for inhalation and occupational hazard, but not for consumption in drinking water. So at the time, it was believed any chromium-6 ingested in drinking water was converted to 3 by stomach acid. However, recent studies on mice and rats have raised questions about this earlier assumption, and the EPA is currently reviewing the science to determine 1, if water utilities should be required to test for chromium-6 in addition to total chromium, and 2, whether a drinking water standard for total chromium should be adjusted, or whether a new standard should be established for chromium-6. In turn, the U.S. EPA recommended that drinking water systems monitor for chromium-6 to better inform their consumers about the levels in chromium-6 in their drinking water. Evaluate to the degree to which other forms of chromium are transformed into chromium-6 in their drinking water, and assess the degree to which existing treatment is affecting the level of chromium-6. Now, why is the EPA reviewing its current standard for chromium? New research on mice and data collected from China suggests that chromium-6 in drinking water may cause stomach cancer in humans. And do any water utilities test for chromium-6? A lot do, or at least some do, and they began a comprehensive monitoring program for chromium-6. Other utilities in the state also are doing that as well. And this is kind of interesting to see how they're handling chromium, especially in their water. And there's a lot of information on chromium-6. The bottom line is it does have some severe effects. The EPA does take a look at it, but even with that regulation, it might not be enough to make sure that chromium-6 is not in your water. And inversely, is not affecting your gastrointestinal function or other issues. So to make sure that your water is safe from any type of heavy metal or chromium-6, it's always a good idea to have your water periodically tested.